this video, you'll learn how to find chi-squared when you're doing a basic crosstab and how to read the chi-square output. So say I'm interested in whether or not internet use is gendered and racialized. So say I'm going to run some crosstabs on that issue. So I'm going to run my first crosstab on whether or not we see, change this, whether or not we see racial differences in internet use. Right? So I'm going to use the variable Hispanic, which measures ethnicity and whether or not someone is Hispanic. I'm going to go over to the statistics box over here, and I'm going to tell SPSS that what I want is chi-square statistics. Just ignore everything else on here. I'm also going to go into the cells box, and just like with any other crosstab, I'm going to tell SPSS that I want to percentage on whatever my independent variable is. So in this case, I think that whether someone's race or ethnicity will affect their internet use. So Hispanic is my independent variable. So I click the percentage for rows, the row percentage. So click OK, and what I get is the same output as for just a regular crosstab, right? So I get over here the valid percent, and then over here this little kind of tidy crosstab, where I can see that people who identify as Hispanic or Latino origin or descent, about 67.2% of them use the internet, whereas about 80% of people who are not Hispanic use the internet, at least occasionally. Right, so this looks like, if I'm just eyeballing this looks like quite a difference, right? It's more than 10%. But how do I know for certain that it's a difference? Well, if you notice right below this crosstab, the SPSS spits out a chi-square test. So here are the things that you need to look at this table. The very, very first thing you need to look at is this part right down here, where it says 0 cells, 0% have expected count less than 5. So what happens sometimes when we have a really large crosstab, so lots and lots of attributes for both of our variables, is that too many of our cells have an expected count of less than 5. So if this percent here is 20%, I should stop, and I need to redo my crosstabs so that it has fewer attributes. I need to do some recoding because I cannot use this chi-square. It does not matter what the chi-square is, I cannot use it. So this is the first thing we look at. Next, I'm just going to look at the details in this row. This is the only row that matters. You don't know how to interpret the rest of these rows. So this is the Pearson chi-square value. Don't worry about interpreting the value, that we often report it as chi-squared equals 84.711. Usually the higher the value, the more significant it is. Right? The degrees of freedom is 1. This is a very small crosstab. It has very few rows and very few columns. And then this is what tells us whether or not it's significant. Right? So what this 0.000 is it's saying that it's kind of less than a 0.001 chance that this is significant, right? Like, so that you would be wrong if you said this was significant. So there's a very little chance if you said definitively, I think that being Hispanic identified affects whether or not you use the internet. There is a less than 0.001 chance that you're wrong. Right? So it ends up being 0.01%, less than a 0.01% chance that you're wrong. This means that what you're looking at is very statistically significant. We can be very confident, looking at this crosstab, that it's representing something real going on in a larger population in terms of racial differences in internet access. So let me do another one. So in general, we're very happy when that number is small. So let's say I'm going to look at sex instead. I'm going to say, I think there's gendered differences between these two groups. If this is already all set up, all of my stuff is still kind of checked off. So my chi-square is checked off, and my row percentages are checked off. I'm going to see what that has to say. So if I look at this crosstab, we can see that it doesn't look like there's really much of a difference. It looks like men are slightly more likely to use the internet, and women are slightly less likely, but this isn't a lot, right? It's just a very small amount. And so I look down here at my chi-square test. I look first to see what percentage of the cells have an expected count less than 5, and it's 0%. Still, this is good. And then I look at my Pearson's chi-square, this row. The value is very small. This gives me an inkling that maybe there's really not much of a difference between these two groups. The degrees of freedom is 1, and my significance is 0.547. So what that means is that if right now I declared I think there's a gender difference in how people access the internet, there's over a 50% chance that I'm wrong. I probably shouldn't do that, right? What we're probably seeing is even if there's this little minor difference between men and women here, it's not actually reflecting anything, a real difference in the population. And so some of the reasons why this can be insignificant, this is statistically insignificant. So some of the reasons why this can be insignificant are that your population is too small, your sample is, rather. So your sample is really tiny, you only have 100 people. It can be very hard to be certain that you're representing something going on in the larger population. It also can be that there just really isn't that much of a difference between the different groups, right? So it's really hard for SPSS to be certain that there's something going on.